We are one day past National Signing Day in December, and if you go down the rankings, you don't have to go down too far to find Penn State on the national list, and just about everything complete for most of the teams across college football. So very impressive showing by James Franklin and staff. We got Tim Aiden on the line and also Marty Lee from Black Shoe Diaries to help us break it all down. Hey, guys.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
It's good. Everything is going well. I got to think, Tim, you're pretty happy with number 6 in the country, second in the Big Ten.
It's hard. It's really hard to complain, Mark. It was number 1 at one point earlier in the year, and of course we knew that wouldn't last. But the way that things are going, even despite having a decommitment on signing day, Andre Roy, a 3-star offensive lineman, flipped to Maryland. That Penn State held on to all the key core members of their class, which include 20 kids in total, but it includes Drew Aller, number one quarterback in the country, Nick Singleton, number 1 running back in the country, and also the Gatorade High School Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley, made a nice video presentation to him, which is pretty cool to see. And then Caden Saunders, actually was the very first commitment in the 22 class back when he was just a 3-star kid and hadn't blown up yet. Now he's, borderline 5-star, and Penn State got in on the ground level of him. That's, it goes to show this staff. I mean, one constant with James Franklin and the staff is the ability to eye this great talent when they're still under the radar as 3-star kids before they blow up and become 4 or 5 stars. So, Saunders, Aller, just another couple people in line with that. And of course, I'd be remiss I didn't mention tonight Dennis Sutton, one of the top defensive ends, just seemed like an elite pass rusher that Penn State's been sorely missing on the defensive side of the ball. There's more. I'm sure Marty can touch on some other ones because he is our recruiting guru at BSD. But that's with guys like that, I mean, it's definitely a nice little early Christmas present for Penn State football fans.
Yeah, Penn State fans could not have asked for a better early Christmas present than this. Being the number 6 class in the country ties Penn State's 2018 class for the highest rated Penn State class of the modern recruiting era. That 2018 class, for those who are wondering, Micah Parsons was the headliner. Odafe Owe, who, if was not for Micah Parsons, probably would be the front runner for NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, was also in that class. Rasheed Walker is going to be a high draft pick this year. Jahan Dotson was in that class. Lots of talent in that class. That said, while both these classes ranked number 6 in the country, I have to give this class the edge as being the best class James Franklin has signed. And why? Because of quarterback. No knock on Will Levis whatsoever. He was the quarterback of that 2018 class. This class, even without Drew Aller, has Bo Pribula, who's one of the most prolific, most productive quarterbacks in the history of Penn State, the history of Pennsylvania high school football, who is a 4-star prospect in his own right. The constant comparison for Bo Pribula is Trace McSorley. And I think every Penn State fan would gladly take another Trace McSorley. But the biggest thing is Aller. He's the number 1 quarterback in the country for a reason. The kid is elite. The one thing that has plagued Penn State more than anything else during the James Franklin era is that elite quarterback play that can take you to the playoff. And I'm not saying Drew Aller is going to be Deshaun Watson, but the one thing I keep saying, so many people, and for a lot of right reasons, draw a lot of comparisons between James Franklin and Dabo Swinney. And for the longest time, Clemson was Clemson. And then Deshaun Watson came along and they finally got over that hump. I'm not saying Drew Aller is going to do it. Nothing is a slam dunk. But Drew Aller could be Penn State's Deshaun Watson. The kid is that good. Like you said, Tim, one thing this staff has always done an excellent job of is identifying talent early. When Mike Yurcich first got to Happy Valley and they offered Aller, he was like the 570th ranked player in the country or something like that. And I watched his film and I'm like, how on earth is this kid not rated higher? And I pounded the table for months for the kid to be rated higher. He had an incredible camp circuit in the spring. He went to the Elite 11 and performed. He had a dominant high school season, and per 247 Sports, he's now the number 3 player in the country. And that doesn't even begin to really scratch the surface, because the elite quarterback's always going to draw the talent. But like Tim said, you have Nick Singleton, the number 1 running back in the country, the National Gatorade Player of the Year. Caden Saunders, who if he was an inch and a half taller, is probably a top 10 player in the country. Our Clay Sourtig from Black Shoe Diaries, as well as Sean Fitz of 247 Sports, has said that Caden Saunders is basically Jahan Dotson combined with KJ Hamler. Like, sign me up. Sign me up for that. And just you go down the line. Like you said, Tim, Denai Dennis Sutton is going to be an elite pass rusher. You have Drew Shelton, who can be an excellent left tackle. In addition to Singleton, you bring in Katron Allen, a high 4-star running back who's a top 150 player in the country. This defensive back class is phenomenal with Cam Miller out of Florida, Mekhi Flowers from Stilton High School up the street in Harrisburg, who could be an elite safety. Christian Driver, the son of Donald Driver, who can be an excellent safety. If you want to nitpick, maybe you say they could have taken one more tackle, but they had another tackle committed to the morning signing day of Andre Roy. So it's really tough to complain about this class. I mean, hell, they even got the number 1 punter in the country. So, like, there really is no – other than saying, hey, you know what, you probably could use another tackle, there aren't any real holes in this class. This is a phenomenal class. And, you know, this is the kind of class that really leads to taking that next step as a program. And if you can stack classes like this together, and, you know, this is a discussion for another day, but the 2023 class off to a tremendous start. Through their first 4 commitments, and any lines, I think, ranked 3rd or 4th in the 2023 recruiting classes. So it looks like they might be able to finally start to stack those classes together. That's what it takes to get over this hump. But the biggest takeaway from this 2022 class is you have Drew Aller, you finally have that elite quarterback, and you have a ton of talent to go around him.
Yeah, Marty, just to add on to the to the excellent secondary players they've added, KJ Winston, who's from my backyard in DeMatha Catholic out in Maryland. Washington Post recently named him their All-Met Player of the Year for football, which is, what All-Met team is for, like, the best players in the DC metro area. And so pretty high honors for KJ there. He's a guy that I know Maryland was heavily in the mix for. And, Mike Loxley, I mean, say what you will about the results he's gotten in the field. It, hasn't been the greatest, but he's good for pulling in a few local DMV kids every year. And, Penn State beat them out for KJ Winston. So that's a big win for them there. And, I agree with everything you said about Drew Aller. I mean, that, the one thing that this program has been missing under Franklin is that elite quarterback. And I would encourage people to, if you go to YouTube, if you look up, there's this website called For the Bloggy. They did a breakdown recently of Drew Aller's high school film. And they just point out just how incredible his vision, not only his vision is, but also his ability to just put the ball, like, right in the exact spot he needs to, like, into tight spaces, or just needs to drop a dime over a defender, or especially and he's doing this when he's got, pressure coming right at him. I mean, he stays there in the pocket. He doesn't panic and try to take off and run. I mean, he makes these kinds of throws, whether or not there's a guy, coming up right to his face. So it's definitely an eye opener, and obviously a little different when you're going up against college, defensive ends or linebackers, as opposed to kids in Northeast Ohio, wherever he's from, Medina. But still, his game certainly translates to the next level. There's a reason why he was the highest rated quarterback high school quarterback in the 2022 class, and why you and I are excited to see him. And I think this brings me to the next thing, though, too. Maybe it's not going up in a tangent, but I think it's actually nice that Sean Clifford is coming back for his 6th year, because at least the staff doesn't have to – they don't have to rush Drew Hauer. They don't have to throw him right into the fire in game 1, which, as of right now, the Big Ten is revising their schedule, but as of right now, they open the season at Purdue next year. And while that may not be as daunting as opening at Wisconsin was this past season, it's still a Big Ten game on the road to start the year is no walk in the park. So it'll be good for Drew to, he comes in January, so does Bo Perbula. And of course, you got Christian Veilleux who's there already. So I think the spring, especially the blue-white game, it's going to feature mostly the 3 of them just showing their stuff. And it'll be a great chance, for, Hauer especially to show why he was so highly rated. And, I think he's got a pretty good shot at winning that number 2 spot behind Sean Clifford, and who he can, sit back, learn from. And, look, if we have a situation like what happened at Iowa this year, Cliff gets, got knocked out of the game. At least this time, I don't know about you, Marty, but I'm going to feel a hell of a lot better whoever they put in to spell for Cliff.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I'd even feel a hell of a lot better, honestly, at this point with Christian Veilleux going in with what we saw from him against Rutgers, let alone with Aller and Perbula behind him. But yeah, getting both Aller and Perbula in as an early enrollees is massive. Not just to get them into Dwight Galt's strength and conditioning program, begin to learn the offense, begin to learn that college life. And I agree with you with Clifford coming back. I mean, I understand a lot of people were kind of torn on Clifford coming back. I was kind of in the same boat where, you know what you have in Sean Clifford, but that's not a terrible thing, especially if the schedule doesn't change. 2 of your first 3 games are at Purdue and at Auburn. So having Clifford there is big, not just for that, but like you said, allow Perbula to learn from him, learn what it's like to prepare for a start on game day and all of that. So there's definitely a lot of positives there. And just to circle back real quick with KJ Winston, I can't believe I forgot him, because he's a kid who I love and I have loved throughout the cycle. And I still to this day think is entirely too underrated by recruiting services. And KJ Winston is definitely a name for Penn State fans to remember, because there are a lot of depth questions at safety going into next season. And I would not be surprised at all to see Winston work his way into the 2 deep right away next year.
I'm not like the Penn State expert like you guys are, but I get asked questions every day, and I had multiple people ask me if it was a good thing that Sean Clifford was coming back. And my immediate response was absolutely. He's one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the conference. So there you go. For as much criticism as he has taken throughout his Penn State career, there's no question he's improved and developed. And if anything was proven this past season, and I think a lot of things were proven, it's that he's tough.
Yeah,
He's tough, and he's a leader, and he's a gamer, and he will take punishment and come back again and again and again against big opponents. And there was an obvious difference between him being on the field and off the field against Iowa, and then him being 50%, 70%, whatever it was against Illinois, and then him being back to close to himself against Ohio State and giving them a chance to win that game. So that is not a bad thing. So when we look at this recruiting class, we see 6th in the country, as you guys are outlining. It ranks right with the Parsons and Dotson class, which, my goodness, every time, and I'm not even deep into the NFL. I just watch the games and just enjoy it. That guy's name's brought up, it seems like every half hour on some highlight show or something, just about, he's just taken the league by storm. But regardless, some of these classes have been more in the 12 to 15 range. Has there been a difference this year, or is it just basically same approach, same effort, same effectiveness? Just you're always going to have a couple guys, key guys, swing one way or the other. Some years you get a little bit luckier than other years, and other years maybe you just barely miss on a few guys that would have really made the class, and that's the only difference. Or is there any type of tangible difference that you can put your finger on this time around?
Honestly, this cycle, the biggest thing was Pennsylvania had a really good class, and that helped Penn State tremendously. The Nittany Lions this cycle signed, so let me kind of make sure I have the numbers right. Eight of the top 14 players in Pennsylvania, and this was the strongest PA class in probably 3 or 4 years. Of those 14, the lowest rated is Keon Wiley, who is a high 3-star, and he plays at Imhotep Charter in Philadelphia. And there are a lot of people in Philadelphia who would tell you Keon Wiley is the best football player in the city of Philadelphia, which is saying something. So whenever the lowest rated in-state guy in your class is the best player in the city of Philadelphia, that's a really, really strong in-state class. That helped Penn State a lot. Another thing that really helped Penn State a lot, well, two things, was Ohio State never offering Caden Saunders and not offering Drew Allard. It was too late in the cycle, and making those just easy victories essentially for the Nittany Lions. They beat Notre Dame for both of those schools, but the fact Ohio State was never seriously interested definitely helped. And even Florida, Penn State had a sneaky good cycle from Florida. Cam Miller, the defensive back we mentioned earlier, as long as Katron Allen, both 4-star prospects out of the Sunshine State. But one other guy out of Florida to watch is Zane Durant, 4-star defensive tackle. If you're a Penn State fan, you have not watched Zane Durant's senior film, please do yourself a favor and go watch it. The dude was unblockable. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but he finished his senior season with something like 17 sacks and like 30 tackles for a loss, which in the state of Florida is really saying something. So I think that was the 3 biggest factors to this class for Penn State. Like I said, it was a really good Pennsylvania class, which always helps. You know, I don't care what program you are. If your in-state class, if you sign 18 of the top 14 players, and of those 14, the lowest rated is an 88 on 247, which is the highest 3-star you can be, you're going to have a really strong class. Being able to steal a 5-star quarterback and a borderline 5-star receiver from your next state over and from your biggest competitors in Ohio State, and then J1 Sider working his magic in Florida and getting the Nittany Lions 3 quality 4-star prospects out of the Sunshine State. That was the biggest thing. And, one thing also that really worked in Penn State's favor is if you talk to anyone who follows recruiting closely, they would tell you what makes Penn State such a good recruiting school is James Franklin and his staff hit visits out of the park. And last cycle, when kids couldn't visit, that really hurt Penn State more than maybe any other school in the country. Because, when you think of Penn State, a lot of people think, and they're not completely wrong on this school tucked away in the mountains in the middle of Pennsylvania, and the weather sucks, and you don't want to go there. And a lot of that's accurate. But when people get to campus and they get around James Franklin and his staff, and just that atmosphere and the family and everything that he cultivates, they blow recruiting weekends out of the water. They hit home run after home run on visits. And the fact they could have visits again this cycle made a huge difference. And, you look at Pennsylvania, you look at a lot of these PA kids, Ken Talley, Keon Wiley, Abdul Carter, they were going to get these kids regardless probably, but some of these other out of the region kids who they brought in, being able to come in these visits made a big difference. And that definitely helped Penn State a lot as well.
Talking Penn.
To add on,
Go ahead, Tim.
I'd be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to the special teams recruiting. Landed a number 1 punter according to Cole's Kicking, Alex Bichetta, who hails from the same school as Blake Gilligan, the Westminster School in Atlanta. He'll be coming in as well, and with Jordan Stout's probably on the way out. The punting, the superb punting game should not miss a beat.
Mm-hmm.
Shetta is what he's cracked up to be. So, which we've forgotten what it's like to not have effective punting. But the first couple of years of Franklin era, when the punting was abysmal, and it definitely cost them a couple games not being able to flip the field position when they absolutely needed to. So it's very good for continuity in that sense. They're bringing in Bichetta. Now, if they can figure out the rest their place kicking, who's going to handle kickoffs, and especially who's going to someone can step up and be a reliable field goal person next year. That would be great too.
Folks, please like the video, share these videos out on social media. We are here every day discussing, debating, analyzing college football, and looking at Penn State here. So please tell people that we are here. Also, check out the work from Tim and Marty on Black Shoe Diaries on SB Nation. And of course, there's a lot to dig in right here as you get into the recruiting class that's sixth best in the country. The bowl game coming up with Arkansas, and the transfer portal makes college football coverage a 24/7, 365 situation these days. Got to ask you guys this one. Now, Ohio State owning the conference, that's got to be a certain level of frustration or a certain category of frustration. But Penn State has clearly been the team that has been the closest on the field, in recruiting, etc. Then when somebody finally passes Ohio State, it's not Penn State, it's Michigan. Is that a different frustration?
Yeah,
Well,
it was,
you want to take this one? You've been harping on this for a while.
Yeah, my biggest thing with this was Michigan is already viewed as a bigger brand than Penn State. And right or wrong, that's how it is. And, you go back to the last 15, 20 years, Penn State has been the better program. They've won more games. They've won more games head-to-head in that matchup that Michigan has. They've beaten Ohio State more times. They've won more Big Ten titles. Even after this year, they've still beaten Ohio State more times and won more Big Ten titles than Michigan has since, I think, 2005. That said, Michigan can now hang their hat on being a college football college football playoff program, which Penn State cannot do. And that can make a big difference in recruiting. It'll be interesting to see how this goes. I mean, Michigan finished this recruiting cycle really strong, which you would expect. You go back to Penn State when they win the Big Ten in 2016, for example, they finished that cycle really strong. Next cycle, we'll really see we'll really show if we can see if there's going to be a big playoff bump or anything like that for Michigan. But yeah, it's Michigan doing this definitely is not a good thing for Penn State. But that said, if the Nittany Lions can come out next year and go to Ann Arbor and beat Michigan, that really kind of helps calm things. I think that's possible because Michigan does lose a lot. Yeah, and it's just, it's very annoying as a Penn State fan because I think I speak for most Penn State fans when I say within the conference, the two teams that are just the most difficult to swallow for two different reasons is Ohio State and Michigan. With Ohio State, I always tell people, a lot of us Penn State fans, we can't stand Ohio State, but it's almost more of a respect thing because, you're what we want to be. You're what every program wants to be. Michigan is annoying because, while Penn State has been the better program for the last 15 or so years, a lot of people view Michigan as the superior program. So it's very easy for me to root against Michigan. And it's bothersome to me too this year. Blake Corum, his cousin and my oldest son are best friends. And he comes from a great family. And it's just I know he's a great kid and I just want to see them lose. So I feel bad for that. But once he's out of Michigan, it'll be great because it'll be easy for me to go back to disliking everything about Michigan.
You are right, Marty. There's no doubt. We have these kind of discussions and debates all the time. People call in, and if people start listing elite programs and they get past all the obvious ones, and I mean in the moment, not necessarily historically, but kind of a combination of the two, they always get to Michigan before they get to Penn State.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense over the last 20 years.
Even if you go back longer, this was going back a few years, so my numbers could be a bit off here. But I remember looking back 2 or 3 years ago, since I think I want to say 1970, Penn State had more national championships, more 10-win seasons, more conference championships, and yet Michigan is just – and I think it's because they do such a good job of marketing their brand, and they were kind of more of that traditional power before Penn State became that traditional power. But, yeah, it's extremely frustrating because there definitely have been recruiting battles over the years that Penn State has lost to Michigan because Michigan is viewed as the bigger brand and the bigger program, whether that's true or not.
Right. It does, talking about what Marty said, yeah, it's certainly annoying. Initially, it was just, okay, well, he got this Ohio State depth machine to try to somehow beat. But now here comes Michigan, storming through and winning the Big Ten in a year when nobody was picking them to do so. I mean, in fact, I'm thinking back to this past offseason. Paul Feinbaum was and other pundits were basically they were already writing Jim Harbaugh's coaching obituary at Michigan. I mean, they were all thinking this was it for him. Like some people were surprised he didn't get fired after last year. But I guess credit to the Michigan athletic department for being patient. I mean, I know they restructured his contract to a lower salary and buyout, but it would have. I guess the easy thing would have been to cave in the public pressure and get rid of him. But now they're being rewarded for their patience, and and kind of Penn State's kind of in a similar situation. I mean, they were obviously James Franklin was nowhere near the hot seat, but definitely a lot of frustration from the fan base over how this season went. A lot of people were certainly would have been okay with him moving on to another program. Back when he was rumored for USC, LSU with jobs. But I'm hoping now, especially with his recent extension, with the commitment from the university to upgrade facilities, upgrade the athlete dorms, especially because Nittany Apartments is something that's stuck in the 80s as far as are concerned. Things like that, and of course he has a recruiting class coming in. I think I'm hopeful that Penn State fans will be rewarded in a similar way. The athletic department's patience with Franklin and commitment to him is going to pay off, similar to what it did for Michigan. And I guess in short term, it's Michigan will certainly be tougher on the recruiting trail. I think that being said, it doesn't seem as if Penn State and Michigan compete for the same recruits as much as you might think. At least from what I've noticed, it seems to be more, Ohio State or SEC programs are, the ones to look out for typically.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. They don't compete for a lot of the same recruits. Sometimes you'll see kids in Western Pennsylvania that they'll both go after, and down in like Maryland and DC. But I think to me the biggest thing that could be a pain in the neck for Penn State is this is going to make it even easier for Michigan to recruit nationally, which they already did better than Penn State. Now, a lot of times Penn State, with Franklin v. Harbaugh, Franklin would sign the better recruiting class because Penn State would do a good job of kind of cleaning up in the region. But Michigan had the ability to go out and recruit California, recruit the South better than Penn State. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing moving forward is this being a playoff team. You have Aiden Hutchinson as a Heisman finalist. Like all of this gives Michigan the ability to continue to do that well. And that could lead to them signing better classes. Not so much taking kids away from Penn State. We've seen it happen a few times. Like Khalil Hudson's a big example of that. But I think it's going to be more of them being able to recruit nationally better could lead to their classes being equal to or better than Penn State's, which in turn makes things a bigger pain in the neck for Penn State moving forward. But again, like I said, you go to Ann Arbor next year and you beat them and you put together a 10-win season and all of this is forgotten because Penn State's back to being what they've been the last 5-6 years under James Franklin.
And to your point, California produced the most Michigan signees in this recruiting class than any other state. All right. Marty Lee, Black Shoe Diaries, Tim Aiden, Black Shoe Diaries. We got a Penn State, Arkansas Outback Bowl game, which should be pretty intriguing. I expect it to be a pretty fun matchup, one of the better bowl game matchups this bowl season, and hopefully we can have you guys back to break it down.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it.